Well, this is one big thank you note from me to you. You are one of the very few people who I could say honestly, without a trace of embellishment, has turned my life around when I was at my darkest moment. So I am delighted to be here and talking to you and telling everyone who can hear about the difference you've made for me. I was working in speech writing jobs, very high pressure, uh, high deadline, turnaround, excellence on deadline over and over. These kinds of jobs until I was in my 50s. And I began to burn out like anyone would. And I had some anxiety and some depression that seemed to be on an upward creep. And then one day I woke up in a blast of brain fog. And it was so sudden and abrupt that I was terrified. And it made me anxious, not just anxious, but I was on the point of panic and I couldn't figure it out. That very day, I was driving, again, in a midst of enormous fear, like what's happening to me? And I couldn't remember how I gotten on that road. And then later that day, I was looking in a cupboard and I found a Tupperware dish of vegetables that should have been in the fridge. And I thought, I'm going to the doctor. I went to neurology and I had a bunch of tests which led to test results, right? They didn't lead to a diagnosis, but they were always saying abnormal, and they didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have a name for what was happening with me, and slowly I began to understand I seem to be reacting to this, and I seem to be reacting to that. That mold seems to be a problem. These chemical smells seem to be a problem. These foods are now posing a problem. So my approach was avoidance. But I didn't get better. And then so I just avoided more. So I finally got to the point where I couldn't avoid any more and stay in my home. One psychiatrist looked at a brain scan and said, well, your brain's not exactly a train wreck. And I thought, you're a psychiatrist. You should know that all my brain hears is your brain train wreck. But in the end, he said, given this array of scanned pictures, if you were a normal government employee, I'd recommend disability because it's not looking that healthy. Then there was another psychiatrist a couple months later who looked at a different scan. And she said, this is highly abnormal. And then she went around my brain and said, there's atrophy here, there's atrophy here. She was saying, given your gender and your age, you're at the 4th percentile, you're at the 5th percentile, and said, look, no reason to mince words here. This is really sad. I'm sorry. And she wouldn't take me for a patient. So at that point, that was breakdown. I'd done everything anyone had told me to do to a T, to the extreme, and I was done. There was no way I saw that I could ever recover my life. There was nothing more for me. The doctors themselves said, we got nothing for you. They used fear. It seemed a sense of alarm. And so they gave me a sense of alarm, then they created a theory, and then they gave me an extreme regime, which I would only do the extreme regime if I were afraid. No one would. It was very unpleasant. It was full of deprivation. There was no joy in it at all. But then I was doing the extreme regime because I was terrified. These were doctors, many doctors, who just scared me when fear was what was making me sick. My lack of quality of life. It just got worse and worse. I got more anxious, and then when I had the big brain fog event, I just got scared of everything. So I lost my sense of adventure, my sense of fun, playfulness, spontaneity. That was all gone. My life got smaller and smaller. I became really irritating to people around. And it was sort of captured by one moment where we were supposed to go pick up a dog. And someone had a dog that they were going to give us, and we liked it in the description. And we saw the photos and videos, and we wanted to go see the dog. And suddenly I'm walking along and saying, I don't know, I'm like, my allergies are bad, and I really don't think, and so I canceled on the dog. And I was the least popular person in my house for a very long time. And I remember lying down on my back looking at the ceiling, sobbing, saying, I never wanted this, I never wanted this, I never wanted this. And I never was planning suicide, but I remember yet But I remember thinking of my kids and bursting into tears, imagining them hearing that I was dead, because I thought, I cannot keep feeling the way that I'm feeling and live long enough to die a natural death. Something ugly is going to happen if I can't get better. So that's how bad it can get. And so when those are the stakes, letting people see you at your weakest is a trivial price to pay to help people out. When I was planning to leave my house, 100-year-old house in a humid area of Washington, D.C., to go to this clean apartment, there was one big flaw in my plan. And that was, I was taking my fear with me. I thought I was moving away from danger, but actually I was running away from fear. And as we know, when you run away from fear, the fear increases. And the fear was a sustaining force of my illness. And then I got a call from a person who said, are you interested in joining a support group for people who have your issue, like mold, illness, chemicals? I said, yes, I am. And she said, but let me explain now. This is not about the new supplements or saunas or air purifiers. This is about rewiring your brain. And I was like, 100 times more interested, 100 times. How do I join? I want to join now. And so she recommended your book, which I read in a day. You were a completely fresh approach and entirely in line with my temperament. From that moment, I started going back to things that I had been afraid of. But I will say, and you know this so well from so many patients, but I was terrified. I thought I was going to die or get dementia if I didn't get away from these triggers. And I would never have been able to figure it out or practice it if you hadn't gone first, gone through your sickness, read all the neuroscience, figured it out, cured yourself, and created a plan for others. I never would have had the courage to do it, or the faith. It was your patience and your guidance and your diligence through your own illness that saved me and a whole lot of others. One of the key parts of the program is elevate your mood throughout the day. I realized that my meditation was based on observe. Just observe your mind. Just observe your mind. Don't react. And that's what I was doing. And then I had Rick Hansen with his expertise, you with the experience of many people who are healing, saying, no, you've got to actively intervene in the activities of your mind and increase the positive. And that's the through line between DNRS and Annie Hopper and all these other approaches. You're able to face the fear enough to reprogram it. You're able to see the false messages and defy them. This is the magic, right? When the message says, don't do that, these bad things will happen, and you defy it and you do it anyway and you feel great. And then that fear is really, it becomes toothless. If I'm doing things I've never done before, to me that means fear has gone down. So it's not about, are you as good as you were before? Oh my God, no. I'm way better. So if you had said, here is Tom at his healthiest at 35, and I'm 65, would I go back there? Not remotely, because that 35-year-old kid was scared and on his way to breakdown. I'm 65, and I'm just rising up, and the fear is falling away. I started a new organization with a close friend, Tim Shriver, who runs Special Olympics, but we started an organization called Unite, and we have a tool called the Dignity Index, and it's about easing political divisions. It's about scoring. How do we talk to each other when we disagree? And it's gotten remarkable traction. We were talking to a corporation this summer in New York City where I stood on the stage myself reading my own speech to 1,800 people. I never would have done that before. We're being asked potentially to go to Jerusalem this summer to bring the Dignity Index and talk about that. It's all powered by DNRS. So thank you. Thank you.